Welcome back to Hardball. A few years ago, the 2008 Summer Olympics were awarded to Beijing, in part because China promised to improve its record on human rights. But now, 4 months before the Games begin, the Olympic torch relay is bringing a new spotlight to China and prompting anger in the streets of Europe and also here in America. Today, the torch is in San Francisco, the only stop in the U.S. Hardball correspondent David Shuster catches up with this report.
Today in San Francisco, officials canceled police vacations, summoned officers from nearby, and put part of the city under lockdown. And this afternoon, as the Olympic torch wound through the city by the bay, instead of joy and celebration, it was a scene of dread and nightmarish security. At issue, China's deplorable record on human rights. In the wake of strong-arm tactics on Tibet, which is seeking more religious and political autonomy, demonstrations against China have been growing. In Europe this week, the Olympic torch relay descended into chaos. This was London, where demonstrators used a fire extinguisher. Still in London, watch the man with the black hat. Almost everywhere along the route there were clashes. This is not Olympic-style Greco wrestling. In Paris, the French tried to protect the torch with 3,000 police, and yet they were overwhelmed. 5 times, Chinese officials in tracksuits had to extinguish the flame and retreat to the safety of a bus. Then, as the Olympic torch left France and headed to California, demonstrators scaled the Golden Gate Bridge. The signs read, "One World, One Dream," and "Free Tibet." The rallying cry was repeated last night at a candlelight vigil, and there were speeches by activists, including the actor Richard Gere.
China wanted this Olympics to show off. So they're not going to be allowed to show off unless they actually have created a society that's worth showing off.
The demonstrations have prompted the International Olympic Committee to consider canceling the rest of the worldwide relay.
This would be a really devastating blow to the Olympic movement, and it would send a very powerful and very negative message to the hundreds of millions of Chinese who anxiously await the opening of the Beijing Olympics.
It would also send a stark message if world leaders boycott the opening ceremonies. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is urging President Bush to do just that. And today, President Bush responded with this.
The Chinese government in good stead if they would, begin a dialogue with the representatives of the Dalai Lama. They'll find if they ever were to reach out to the Dalai Lama, they'd find him to be a really fine man.
White House officials wouldn't say if President Bush meant that as a threat. Meanwhile, the torch is supposed to go next to Argentina and then a dozen other countries. The games themselves will begin in August, and that leaves world leaders 4 months to decide whether the glow from the Olympics in the shadow of Beijing deserves praise or protest. I'm David Shuster for Hardball in Washington.